Welcome everyone to the Fall 2021 South Texas College Communication Department Speech Competition. Today's contestants are competing for first, second, and third place. In this speech competition, we will hear an original informative speech from each contestant. This speech competition provides an opportunity for speakers to improve their public speaking abilities. Public speaking skills empower speakers to inform, persuade, and entertain. Additionally, being able to communicate effectively with others is key to success in any line of work. Special thanks to our judges and the communication department, without whom this contest would not have been possible. Finally, we would like to thank all contestants for stepping out of their comfort zones and competing today. So without further ado, let's begin this competition.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Villegas. Today, I'm going to be talking about a topic that affects many individuals throughout their daily lives and is unfortunately very misunderstood and very misdiagnosed. I want you to visualize something for me, just for a quick second. Have you ever walked into a room and forgot what you were walking in there for, or have troubled focus on homework that is due very, very soon? People with ADHD have to go through that struggle every minute of their life, only 10 times worse. I have witnessed what ADHD has its effect on people. I have had a cousin who has suffered with ADHD since he was 3 years old. It wasn't until he was properly diagnosed and treated that he was able to cope with the disorder and has reached his full potential. Many people think that ADHD is just an issue that makes you more distracted or more energetic than normal. ADHD is so much more than that. It is a struggle that many people have to go through, females and males combined. ADHD is known to affect females in many different ways than it does in males, which can create their diagnosis going by undetected. This can and has made an impact on so many people's lives, and I think it's important that we come and understand and inform each other about this topic. Now that I've given you a simple understanding of the disorder, it's important to understand what ADHD is. So what is ADHD exactly? ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. ADHD comes with many challenges. ADHD symptoms can vary from internalizing to externalizing symptoms, the latter being more common in females. Because of this, there are many females who go undiagnosed and unnoticed. This can worsen symptoms and create a difficult situation for somebody to go through. Some, but not all, symptoms of ADHD include impulsivity, hyperactivity, fidgeting or constantly moving, having trouble focusing, constantly procrastinating, and more. Internalized symptoms can be things like not necessarily talking about their issues with the disorder, having low self-esteem, being introverted or quiet, struggling with procrastination, doing either immensely well under pressure or suffering under pressure. ADHD usually comes with other disorders, like autism, depression, anxiety. This is another reason why it goes by undetected. ADHD can look like pretty much anything and usually likes to hide itself underneath different disorders like these. The second point I am going to be talking about is the statistics with ADHD. Did you know that boys are more likely to be diagnosed than girls are? Only 12.9% of boys have ADHD, and only 5.6% of girls have been diagnosed with it. While the numbers are constantly rising throughout the years, the constant overlooking in girls is what makes this number so different. Usually, people are diagnosed with this disorder since childhood, ranging from around 4 to 17 years old. Many, if not most, are diagnosed with other disorders on top of ADHD. 6 in 10 children have had other mental disorders with ADHD. Only around 75% of people are treated for their symptoms. Most are receiving medical treatment, while others have some sort of therapy as their treatment. Most people have said that their treatments make their lives so much easier and more simpler for them, mostly because their symptoms are lessened. The people with their treatment have to deal with it on their own, and that can be hard for somebody who has to balance their life and their disorder on top of that. Because of these effects, it's important to address this next point, which is creating awareness. If you've ever had a problem before, you know that sometimes a single choice or even a single second could have changed the entire outcome of the situation. This can be applied to diagnosing ADHD. All it takes is for the right doctor or even the right person to notice the right issue to change somebody else's life for the better. ADHD symptoms are more difficult than they seem to be. It's so distracting and so problematic, especially when you need to get something done. Just because something is labeled as something else due to social stereotypes does not mean that we have to make these social stereotypes a reality for people. And that does not mean that we have to take them seriously either. ADHD is not a disorder that affects more men. We just fail to see how it affects females. ADHD can affect anyone. It is complicated, and we really do need to understand how to help people with this disorder. To put it all into a conclusion, people need to be more open-minded towards all genders and also towards ADHD. Just because ADHD affects females differently does not mean that they're not being affected at all. If you've had an issue that was solvable, and if somebody just listened to you, you would want them to listen, right? I think it's the same with ADHD. And if you think about all of the people we could help just by listening, spreading awareness is definitely worth it. Thank you so much for listening to my topic and giving me an opportunity to talk about ADHD and how it affects other people.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Today, I'll be talking about fatherhood and about being a dad at a really young age. I was at the age of 18 when I heard those words, "I'm pregnant and you're going to be a dad." My life was put at a pause. I didn't know what to do. Today, I'll be talking about some of the worries I had when I was that age, some of the worries I had when I didn't have any money, and some of the accomplishments along the way. There's this article by The Bump, Top 10 New Dad Fears, and there was something that stuck out to me. It said, "Will I do everything right?" And that's what I thought. At the age of 18, I thought, well, I do everything right as a father. A lot of things came to mind, especially when family and friends kept on telling me how bad I messed up. My life is over now. There's nothing I can do. Well, there's a lot of options people can take. My family members, such as my parents, told me to get an abortion. This was 14 years ago when abortion was legal. That wasn't an option for me. There was other options like pack up and run away. Another option is to pay child support and never be there for that child. But that's not the type of man I was, and that's not the type of man I am. By then I realized that it was just me and my family, and all we had was each other. So we packed up and we left. It was a struggle. We struggled, moving from apartment to smaller ones, and eventually being homeless. We didn't have cars, and if we did, we didn't have reliable cars. We took the metro bus to work and back every day. We had to struggle to get some food on the table. So then that's what sacrifices had to come into play. I had to make some sacrifices for my family, and I left to go work. I left town, I left the state, I left my pregnant girlfriend at home at the time so I can go make money to provide for my family. And that's what I did. I went to work. It was hard. It was hard. We were alone. They were alone. But I knew that this hard work was going to pay off, that we eventually were going to be together one day, happy. It took me 3 years of hard work, working in the sun, getting dirty, having very little to eat, to get a house for my family, for my now wife and our kid, our son. Now we have a house. At the age of 21, I have my house. Now I have 3 kids, 3 boys in all. We have reliable transportation to get our boys where they need to go, wherever they need to be at all times. These are the accomplishments that I made for my family. And there's also this other article that I read by all pro dads. My favorite thing about being a dad, and there's something that stuck out in that article that said how deeply I love them. Well, everything I did was for them, and everything I continue to do is for them. That's how deeply I love my kids and my family. I'll continue to work hard, and I'll continue to do what I have to do to provide for my wife and kids. There's birthdays that go by, and I got those same family members, those same friends that come by, and they tell me how proud they are, how proud and how far I've gotten. But it doesn't matter what they say, because it was never about them. It was about me and my family and what I had to do to provide and to do and to give them what they needed. So for those who are going to be a dad, I'm here to tell you that as long as you work hard and to provide for your child, you'll be fine. And for those that are dads, I just want to tell you to continue to work hard. Your kids love you, and they see all the things you do for them. And to all dads, I just want to leave you at this. Welcome to the club. Thank you.
Imagine being a pregnant woman who loves their unborn baby. You nurture this love and can't wait for the moment that you meet them, only for you to be stripped away due to medical complications. As a human who's very much alive, I know for a fact that I have experienced being born. Do I remember this? Not really, but my parents say it's one of the best moments of their lives. Today, I will be talking to you about the American healthcare system and how it affects women who are giving birth today. First off, I'll explain the data of America through multiple studies. One of the studies, conducted in 2018, states that for every 100,000 live births, 17.4 women pass away. To put this into perspective, 10,000 births happen daily in America. And out of those births, 2 babies will go home motherless. Adding these numbers up, 700 women die a year. And when comparing these numbers to other countries, you'll realize that Canada is second worst of the first world countries, but is still half of the United States at 4.8 deaths every 100,000 live births. While the numbers don't seem that much, this could result in 350 lives being saved if we use these policies instead. New Zealand and Norway have the best mortality rate at 1.7, which is equal to the amount of Americans, but only theirs is at 100,000 live births rather than 10,000 live births. You may ask yourself, what is America doing so wrong? The answer is the healthcare system. Both Canada and the USA have equal numbers of obstetricians, which are the women or men that help the women give birth and also take care of the women after they give birth. The difference is that midwives, which are guaranteed in Canada, which means that they go home with the women, like to do visitations, are not guaranteed in America. It only depends on your insurance or whether you are wealthy enough for this. Midwives are vital to the health of both women and infants, seeing that 52% of deaths are postpartum. And to add to this, 20% of suicides are also from postpartum depression. This means that if midwives were to visit the houses, just like in Canada, they would see symptoms or worsening mental health, and they would help resolve the problems before they even make it to an extreme extent. Not only that, But a vaginal birth costs $14,000 in America, and that number can range from $8,300 to $20,000 depending on your state. In other countries, because a publicly paid healthcare system, birth is either completely free or only costs a couple $100 depending on whether you go to a privatized hospital. Maternity leave is also a luxury here in America. Some are not granted any at all, while others can only get up to 6 weeks off fully paid. Those 6 weeks off aren't even guaranteed, seeing as your employer can choose to deny you your maternity leave, or they can just fire you for even getting pregnant in the first place. A puppy isn't taken away from its mother until it is 8 weeks old, yet they expect for an infant child to be taken away from its mother at only 6 weeks. In Canada, parents get 15 weeks of both maternity and paternity leave. They can also get paternal leave without risk of losing their job for up to 1.5 years. What should Americans do to make things better? The answer for this question is publicly paid healthcare system. The argument to this being, well, aren't taxes going to get higher? But those people that ask these questions don't seem to realize that these higher taxes help save their lives and the lives of people that they love as well. We can take example from these other first world countries and install these policies into our own country to make life better for at least the mothers that are dying. Americans spend the most money in healthcare system. $10,000 is the average for us, and $3,000 more than any other country. This means that we spend $980 billion just in 2017 alone because of how expensive this all is. People are avoiding going to doctors until their symptoms worsen to the point of death because of how costly it is. They'd rather die of their illness than die being less wealthy than what they originally were, which really isn't that much in the first place. Through my conclusion, I want to remind you that the first step into the right direction is getting the baby's first few moments alive on this earth to be as stress-free for both mothers and fathers and parents. Make midwives and obstetricians as accessible as possible and all medical costs relating to them cheap. I have given you the data, I have given you the reasons America is doing so poorly, and I have given you a possible solution, all for the hopes that one day this can become a reality. Thank you.
Now, I want all you in the audience to take a second and think of a philosopher. It doesn't matter what type of philosophy they practice, just think of one. All right, do you have your philosopher? Now, I'm sure most of you thought of Socrates, Plato, or Aristotle, because they did make great contributions to the world of science and philosophy. But I can almost assure that none of you thought of Diogenes. Now, who is Diogenes? Diogenes was the man who lived on the streets with nothing to his name except a tub where he slept and the clothes on his back. Today, I'm going to be speaking of such a man, who he was, his philosophy, and some things that are unique about him. So, you learn philosophers all your life through history. Now, take this opportunity to learn about a lesser appreciated one, Diogenes of Sinope. Now, as I mentioned before, Diogenes of Sinope was born, in Sinope. There was no set date to when he was born because back then they didn't keep proper documentation of this sort of stuff, and he wasn't really a man of interest, so not many people thought it was necessary. He was exiled from his hometown and then sent to Athens. His reasons of exile vary depending on which source you choose to read from. Some say it was his father who defiled the currency, while others say it was him. Nonetheless, he was brought out of his hometown and went to Athens. Later on in his life, he was later kidnapped and sold as a slave. I'll get back to that in a bit. So this was just a brief outlook on his life. And now that you know about it, why don't we learn about his study? Diogenes was a cynic, and he learned that from his own teacher, Diogenes, I believe. I butchered that, but excuse me. Now, he learned cynicism and then taught it on the streets of Athens to anyone who was interested or anyone who stopped by. So, I'm pretty sure you're asking yourself, what is cynicism? Well, cynicism is often referred to as the way of the dog because that's basically what it was. It was a minimalistic lifestyle which was where all luxuries were not allowed and you didn't affect nature that much. Diogenes was a hardcore cynic. He's often referred to as one of the founders of cynicism or as the father of cynicism, but that's not true. He himself had a teacher who taught him. Though Diogenes is one of the most famous cynics and a cornerstone in the cynic community, he was not the founder of it. So, now you know what cynicism is and his life. So, what made him stand out? Now, there's a lot of stories about philosophers, but most of them are tame. They're respectful. This wasn't the case for Diogenes. He was often referred to as Socrates gone mad. Many of us know who Socrates is. He was a wise man. He was one who had a school, and he was often respected. Now, what do they mean by Socrates gone mad? Well, Diogenes was a bum, mostly. When many people saw him, they thought of him as like a hobo. But he was very intelligent. And he did have a few students, but he didn't teach in schools. He taught on the streets, where only those interested in learning would stop by and hear his lectures. Diogenes practiced cynicism very devoutly. It got to the point where one day he saw a kid drinking water from his hands. Now, at the time, Diogenes only had a wooden bowl to his name. Any other possessions he owned, he deemed necessary. But after he saw that boy drinking from the wooden bowl, he said, "What do I need this for? My philosophy says that I have to get rid of it. I don't need it. That's a luxury." Now, he threw away one of his 3 possessions. That's how devoted he was. So, another thing that made him stand out was he lived a carefree and shameless life. Whenever he felt the need to defecate or urinate or perform other bodily actions, he just went for it. He didn't do it in respected areas. He did it wherever he pleased because he felt no shame. He argued that those are just bodily functions. Everyone does them. The fact that others do it in privacy isn't my opinion or my choice. Now, Diogenes is referred to as the original cynic. Though this is incorrect, he was one of, in my opinion, the best cynics. Now you know about Diogenes' life of knowledge and defiance towards the natural way of thinking. So maybe you'll learn more about this unappreciated philosopher in your own time. Diogenes of Sinope lived the way he wanted and died the way he wanted, with nothing to regret. In the end, that's what matters. He was the wisest of them all, teaching only those who cared and bowing down to no one. Thank you for listening to me and learning about Diogenes, his life, his philosophy, and what made him stand out. Thank you.
Over the years, the human race has developed one form of entertainment, and throughout the years, the video games have been the one thing that humans have been able to keep and sustain throughout the years. Ever since I was born in 2005, and I was first introduced to these things to the video games a while ago, I had made it my passion to somewhat study these magnificent creations given by man. Now, without further ado, I'm going to give you all a brief history of video games from the 90s, from the early 2000s, and then all the way to 2010. Let's start off with the 90s. Now, the 90s, that's when it all started to go uphill. Originally, video games were just imagine kind of like little stick figures, sort of. But then, after a while, those stick figures became much more detailed drawings. Not too detailed, but still somewhat detailed. And in the 90s, 3 companies rose to fame: Sony, Nintendo, and Sega. Not Microsoft yet. They didn't come out yet. Now, Nintendo and Sega, they decided to create their own little projects with that had graphics that were 16-bit, not the original 8-bit. It was a little bit over the 8-bit. Now, they both kind of advertised the somewhat like a little bit faster processing power. And because of that, Sega and Nintendo were kind of like in a clash during this time, seeing who had the better system and consoles and plus they even made a whole bunch of cool games coming out every year to top each other. Now Sony, on the other hand, rather than going into 2D like Sega and Nintendo, they decided to go something different. They decided to make 3D graphical games. They made them through this cool engine called the PlayStation 1 or the PlayStation X. And with it came an assortment of a whole bunch of games that were in 3D. Although Nintendo and Sega did later on follow Sony with this idea of 3D graphical games, Sony was the first one to ever was the first company to somewhat create 3D model games. Now that we finished with the 90s, let's move on to the 2000s era. Now in the 2000s era, one company had finally come out of the shadows, and that was Microsoft. They had come up with this cool machine called the Xbox, just Xbox, not anything else. And with it, they promised better graphics, much more faster running speed, and more memory, and of course the ability to go online. And then Sony, on the other hand, although they were the first ones to come out before Microsoft, they had also advertised online, but they had done it a lot earlier than Microsoft. But Microsoft said that, hey, we have the online a little bit better. Now Nintendo, they didn't really have that much. Their new system, the GameCube, it was basically an Xbox or PlayStation, but it didn't have the ability to go online. Although some of them did, but most of its library was just regular Nintendo games with better graphics. Now Sega, well, they kind of stopped making their own consoles, but they did move on and put their games on the other systems. And speaking of other systems, Microsoft had, after the success of the original Xbox, they decided to create an Xbox 360. Same thing, just better graphics, better memory, a little bit better online. So did Sony with their PlayStation 3. Now Nintendo, they did something different. They decided to stray away from Sony and Microsoft and let them do their own thing, and they created a brand new system called the Nintendo Wii. There, it offered an immersive experience where you could get the controller and point at the TV and interact with it in a way. Now that we finished up with 2000, let's go on to the current era, the 2010. Now, nothing really changed that much with Microsoft and Sony. They basically released a little bit of the same console they basically released the same consoles, like the Xbox 360 was updated to the Xbox One, and the PlayStation 3, Xbox 4. They were the same console except more online features, better graphics, more memory, and that was it. Now Nintendo, they decided to make something else. They created a little bit of an update for the Wii called the Wii U. There you would have you would hold one controller underneath. You would hold one controller that had the TV, and it had like a somewhat TV screen on it. And the TV screen kind of also portrayed it on top of the TV too. So it's like you're playing it twice. Now, after that, a couple years after the release of the Wii U, they decided to create the Nintendo Switch. It's basically a Nintendo console it's basically a PlayStation or an Xbox that you can take on the go or play it on the TV. Now, As I conclude this presentation, I'd hope that you all learned about a brief history of the video games over the past 3 decades. Thank you.
Have you ever done something to prove yourself? To overcome that obstacle that seems you can't get out of? To surpass that blockage in life, either mentally or physically? I have. And they always say, don't run away from your problems. But at this point, I think that was good for me. I entered the long distance running world when I was just a freshman. And middle school, I suffered through the bullying and all, and mostly because of what I looked like. And to prove myself, not only to others, but majorly just as into my own image, I started running. And to run, it's always trying to seek that more of yourself, to push yourself to get more of what you desire from you. How much you could push yourself into that limit and to see if that limit, it could also be surpassed. And not only do I share that, it's also common around other athletes. These athletes have made the sport recognizable and have made it well known. I'm talking about athletes such as Kenisa Bekele, who started in a humble background, such as like farms and mostly running to work, running to school, running home. Just like consistency of running has shaped it, like if it was an instinct. But what if that instinct could be pursued? We have athletes like Hichnam El Garouj, who have marked the middle distance world by his amazing stride, by his physical components, and most known is, we know athletes of Kenya, Ethiopia to be good runners, but Morocco, it was unrecognizable. And yet, they're here making a difference in the world. We have athletes such as Farah, the best British long-distance runner in history. And he's well known throughout social media and mostly through the running world. And he's just that famous person you go to when you think of track in the long-distance field. And mostly known, and what I want to talk about is Joshua Cheptegei. Joshua Cheptegei is the current world record holder for the 10K and the 5K with unbelievable times. And he's done this due to the fact that he's ran with the best pair of shoes that Nike has ever created. And here we are talking about the tech. When you mostly think of tech, you think of those components such as recovery tools, those ice pads, especially like you could input the temperature. And what I want to centralize is the tech as in shoes. It's very important, the shoes that are made in the long distance world. The reason why I emphasize on this is because we started off with a dressing shoe. Just like this, the one I'm carrying, it's my own, with spikes on it, on the track. I never knew in the difference of more than 100 years that this would become into this. As you could see, it's the Aerial Swift overall, just the Atom Knit. It feels like a sock on the top, here with a carbon fiber plate and an AirPod to make that bounce. And sure, there is that controversy of the shoes are what makes the athlete go faster, such as in these, where I want to make known of Adhd Kipchoge. Adhd Kipchoge is currently known as the best long-distance runner in the world, worldwide, due to his marathon success. And I want to emphasize that, since not only do we gain this recognition due to the tech that's been innovative or the times, because sure, the sub 2-hour marathon does sound as something that's unachievable, something that seemed impossible. But it was possible due to the ethics of running. What do I mean by ethics? The consistency, the gratitude, the hard work, and overall, what you do with your own environment. How much you could push yourself in that training. Because training In running, it's not about making things assertive. It's about how much you're willing to put in as a runner. It's about pushing yourself every day. Not other people are going to push yourself. In running, you're your own teacher. You learn from your own lessons. And that's what's astounding about running. Because it could be the shoes. It could be how much you've gained through success. But overall, running is a lifestyle. Thank you.
Have you ever defied the crown? Well, Blackbeard has. A 6-foot-tall man with black beard, long black beard, commanding more than 30 ships under his power, stripped away by death. Where did this start? How did this start? Where did he gain such power and such knowledge? Well, this all started back in Bristol, 1680, in the United Kingdom. Not much is known about Blackbeard and his past, but we do know that he partook in the Spanish War, which lasted 12 years. Here he gained experience as a privateer, and doing this daily for 12 years, not only it's engraved in the person, it engraves itself in the person, but it becomes a part of their life. Blackbeard was one of these people, and when the war ended, for 3 years he did nothing. He was a regular person, but it was after these 3 years that he realized that what he did best was piracy. He could do this without fail, and he decided to join one of his captains, Captain Hornigold. Now, they didn't last long, but Captain Hornigold gave him an ex-former slave, the Queen Anne's Revenge, a 103-foot-long vessel with 30 ships on each side ready to destroy anything that came to it, with crewmates along. But unfortunately, Hornigold was given a pardon, set sail for a pardon, hunting down his own shipmates, including Blackbeard. Now, Blackbeard was a skilled sailor. Not only did he conquer the Caribbean Sea with fear, but he did it with boldness. Now, how did he do this with boldness? Well, he decided to create a blockade in Charlestown, demanding medicine. This medicine was needed for his crew. Now, the way he formed this blockade was not a simple ship waiting at the coast. No, it was more than you imagine. Various ships along the coast ready to fire at anyone that stood in their way. Now, this was not acceptable for the English, as Charlestown was a town of commercialism and it was a harbor town. So they needed this. So they created a deal with him. They created, as long as he shared 50% of the loot he gained, he would be all right. He would be a legal privateer once again. However, complications grew and grew even more. He broke his deal. He had no choice. And Captain Maynard, Robert Maynard, was set to hunt after him. Now, the way he approached this, Blackbeard was no man to simply approach and kill. He was fearful, but you needed a great strategy. Now, the way Maynard approached this was he approached in a slightly odd manner, in a manner that you won't expect this often. He set sail towards him and offered for quarters to sleep, somewhere to sleep. His crew was injured, he would say. And when night fell, Maynard would launch a surprise attack against Blackbeard. Blackbeard was overwhelmed by this surprise and unfortunately was killed. 20 bullet wounds and various stab wounds. Not only did he survive this and kept on fighting, but he had an impact on the world so strongly that we still talk about him 300 years later. And I think that's an impressive feat. But No matter how legendary of a hero, how infamous of a person you may be, we're all destined to the same fate, and that is death. I think that Blackbeard had a major impact as we learned from this, and we realized how one person can actually change stuff. But I would say that, in conclusion, to end this, just like the man that was feared most in the Caribbean Sea, we learned a bit who he actually was and how he climbed to his infamous lifestyle. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nathan Duncan, and I would like you to take a moment to think about bubblegum. Now, you might be thinking how it's just an expendable or superfluous item to have, and how you can just throw it away after a quick use because it's not of any major significance. But this, however, was not always the case. Bubblegum came to be the way we see it today because of one man, the Bubblegum King. The majority, if not all of you here today, have chewed gum at least once in your life, and it's an experience that's fairly uneventful unless you accidentally swallow it. I have done a fair amount of research and have discovered some truly interesting information about the Bubblegum King. He had a fairly quick uprising, and after only about 5 years, a rather quick downfall. The Briscoe Center of American History says that Andy Parris was born in 1919 in Detroit, Michigan. His parents were Greek immigrants, and they owned a tobacco store. And at the age of only 7 years old, Andy started working in his parents' tobacco store. Now, years and years later, during World War II, Andy actually started importing candy from Mexico, and this is where he gained some contacts or connections with the latex industry in Mexico, because at the time, latex was a crucial ingredient in making bubblegum. Now, after the war, the latex supply was at an all-time low, and after Andy had seen some kids in the street fighting over a piece of gum, he knew what he was going to do. He was going to make his own bubblegum business. By 1947, Andy had his hands on the latex industry in Monterrey, Mexico, and he started flooding America with very affordable gum. The Briscoe Center of American History estimates around 5,000 tons of bubblegum was distributed in the time span of only 2 years. That is, of course, a lot of bubblegum. It was at this time that the Life magazine named Andy the Bubblegum King. The Austin Chronicle says that Andy was the most photographed man in America for 2 years. A Statesman News article says that he even taught child actress Natalie Wood how to blow bubbles for her role on Miracle on 34th Street. He was a Hollywood celebrity, and his son, John Parris, even described Andy as a confectionery Elvis after he was shown a scrapbook by his mom of Andy's life and his success that he had. Although his success was great, it did not last for long, and so began Andy's nearly immediate downfall. Soon, the IRS took notice in Andy's business because according to John Parris, Andy ran an all-cash business, meaning he paid for the latex in cash and for the labor of the workers at the factory all in cash. So it was only a matter of time until the IRS and the free market took notice as to what was going on with Andy's business. And there were also other competitors who seen the wealth and fame that Andy had gotten, and they wanted that. They wanted the same success that Andy had. And so by 1950s, Andy, his empire that he had built was already starting to crumble and fall. So he's trying to get it back, and he's trying to get the success that he had back. And so he makes new candies, such as licorice-flavored gum and candy-coated gum on a stick. But these inventions, however, weren't very successful, and they weren't very popular. And so by 1955, Andy was actually forced to liquidate his factory in McAllen, Texas, in order to pay off some taxes. And then he moved to the vending machine business. But this, however, did not result in anything as major or big as the earlier bubblegum business. And just as soon as it had begun, Andy's empire, his success, was eventually over. And he ended up dying in 1997. Andy used his sales skills to make his way to the top of bubblegum business and fame very quickly. And although his business was thriving, when things did not go exactly as planned, it resulted in his immediate downfall. So next time you buy a pack of gum for $1, think about why it is so cheap. Think about the amazing story of Andy, the bubblegum king Parris, because although his success was great, his fame was great, and it did not last for long, it was fame nonetheless. And it can truly open your mind to what you can accomplish. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sofia Salazar Lozano, and the title of my speech is Talking with Plants. If you've ever tried to grow a plant, you've probably also scoured through the internet for gardening advice and seen this one point. Why not try talking to your plant? You might talk about your day or whisper compliments to its leaves. Either way, the end goal is that your plant will be encouraged to keep on growing. Through all this, though, you probably won't be expecting them to actually recognize you're there or even contribute to what seems like to us just one-sided conversations. So what if I told you that they do? In fact, not only do plants listen, but they might be talking back as well. People have personified plants for as long as we've been around them, like seeing trees as wise elders, for example, in folk stories. Naturalist Charles Darwin, in his book The Power of Movement in Plants, states that, quote, "It is hardly an exaggeration to say that the tip of the radicle, which is the first organ to appear in a seedling, its primary root, acts like the brain of one of the lower animals, equating plants' reactionary responses to that of animals' capabilities." With this in mind, let's first recognize the parts of plants that play into their ways of communication. Next, discuss what led to the concept of plant communication becoming controversial within the scientific community, before finally expand our perceptions of what communication can look like via plants, to better understand and gain respect for the world around us. To begin with, plants might stay silent to our ears, but underground there is a busy network of traffic going on. A plant is usually split between the outside world and being buried deep in the dirt. In both areas, though, they can sense the presence of things in their environment, such as predators or changes in the ecosystem. How is this done? Well, a team from the University of Alabama at Birmingham in 2018 concluded a study that determined this was possible via a system of hundreds of sensory membrane proteins. What this allows is an extraordinary range of communication we don't often associate with plants. For example, according to another study published in 2018 by a German team of biologists, when lightly brushing against a leaf, that plant then sent distress signals, electrical pulses, to other plants nearby, letting them know something was in the area. The others then changed their growth behavior accordingly, such as stopping with growing bigger leaves or thicker stalks to avoid seeming more tasty for a nearby herbivore. These signals can be reached by neighbors through two ways. One, via the air, and two, because of a root system intertwined with a fungal network to connect to each other. Plants can sense the chemicals another releases when they are fending off a pest, simultaneously telling everyone that there's a threat close by. You probably already know what this smells like. After the grass has just been cut, it's these chemicals we smell being released into the air saying, "Hey, back off." With the roots, it's been found that there are a lot of green communities, like forests, all connected through a symbiotic fungi called mycorrhiza. This fungi infects the roots of growing plants by spreading through the soil, coating every little particle of dirt, and eventually getting all these flora locked together. In doing so, the mycorrhiza creates a sort of a wood wide web. This is an actual term that's been used in studies, by the way, so remember it for later. Moving on, this wood wide web was not always so widely accepted. In fact, the field of plant communication could have died off into the obscurity of pseudoscience because of just one book. In 1973, that book was called The Secret Life of Plants, and later attracted a larger public audience with a movie adaptation. So, we have all these people hearing claims that science has proven plants' ability to sense human emotions, or that they have a conscious mind like ours, effectively anthropomorphizing plants in the public eye. The truth was, though, that these theories had not yet been fully explored, and as a result lacked evidence to back them up. To the scientific community, this was like if you know you didn't clog the communal toilet, and yet someone's going around saying not only that you did, but that you're proud enough of the fact to want everyone else to know as well. The impact of the backlash from the scientific community after this made botanists made botanists exploring this concept out to be crazy almost, creating the stigma against further studies into this subject. Why would anyone want to fund the research of scientists studying if plants can talk? The thing is, though, they are communicating, albeit not in the conventional ways you and I might with each other. Just as we're taught in biology that it's a fight for survival as plants compete to become the tallest or to spread out their roots the farthest to gather the most nutrients, the opposite may be just as true. We as humans are social creatures. Belonging to a community not only feeds that inherent need, but it also benefited us all those years ago with the earliest of humans. Having someone back you up when you're not able to support yourself alone anymore is necessary to continue survival. Otherwise, you might get kicked when you're already down. So in the forest, even though those trees might race each other to the top of the canopy, it also seems that they stop to help their fellow giants, regardless of type, grow up and stay alive. In an experiment between two different species of trees, ecologist Suzanne Simard covered a plot of young trees with bags full of radioactive isotopes of the element carbon to trace if it moved from one to the other. One tree was covered with shade so that it was lacking the necessary carbon, and what they saw was that the other species sent over what that tree was missing. Furthermore, her and her team found that this includes many other molecules, not just elements, as well as hormones and alleles, genes, and especially so by what are called hub trees. Also sometimes referred to as mother trees, they harbor chemical knowledge and genetic information that can be passed on to their kin. Trees care for their kids. These adopted smaller trees, even as seedlings, receive genes, nutrients, and more resources and aid, such as when a mother tree might reduce her roots in the dirt to give those little kids some more space to grow their own roots. All this information being shared between the community of different species in one big forest, courtesy of that Wood Wide Web. In conclusion, plants live a much more complex world we're only beginning to understand. They know when you're talking, sensing the vibrations in the air. As Sita Dodd at The Guardian notes, quote, Smithsonian and NASA show mild vibrations increase growth in plants, improving communication and photosynthesis. They're aware when you're walking over, under, or near them, trained above their underground roads. Though it was taboo once upon a time, the idea of plant communication is making a comeback now. Today, we have gained a better understanding of what makes plants able to communicate, the history behind this subject, and expanded our perception of what communication can be. So, next time you're taking a walk through a park or a trail, remember the world beneath your feet and the life that comes from it. They provide us with the very air we breathe to live, and we're much more alike than you might initially think. So, there's no harm done in stopping to chat with them every now and then. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Before we announce the winners of this semester's speech competition, we would like to thank the generous donors who helped make this year's awards possible. On behalf of the Communication Department and all of the participants, we would like to extend a very special thank you to Dr. Rosalinda Cantu, Mrs. Vanessa Earhart, Mrs. Irma Garcia, Dr. Petra Guerra, Miss Michelle Mendoza, Mrs. Angela Sarmiento, and Mr. Michael Skills. Thank you all for your donations. These awards would not have been possible without you. Now, for the moment we've all been waiting for. The winners of the Fall 2021 speech competition are, in third place, Ian Mata. In second place, Nathan Duncan. And in first place, Sofia Salazar Lozano. Congratulations to every student who participated in this year's competition. You all did amazing, and we were so happy you could be here. And now, to conclude this wonderful event, Dr. Petra Guerra.
As we come to the conclusion of this amazing event, let me just say, this will not be the only one. We had some excellent presenters, and I wish we could give each one of them first place. Thank you to each one of you for participating in this competition. We're extremely proud of your abilities. I would like to thank Eric Webster for all the amazing work he has done. Eric not only set up the recording center and recorded all the participants, but he made sure that each one of us was aware of what needed to be done. Additionally, the students said Eric was a great coach. Thank you to all the fantastic donors who made this project possible. Without your generosity, this would not have been possible. Thank you, Eric, for collecting all the donations, and thank you, Vanessa Eckhart, for your help and all the reminders to us. To our judges, Dr. Dora Saavedra, Dr. Joe Martinez, and Ms. Andrea Fuertes, thank you for taking time from your busy schedule to give us the honor of having you as a judge for this wonderful event. To Angela Sarmiento and Eric Webster, thank you for being great co-hosts and helping make this project an amazing event. A special thanks goes to Mr. Izaguirre for providing school transportation for the participants from Mission Collegiate High School. And certainly, last but not least, thank you to Dr. Rosalinda Cantu and our division for all your support. This would not have been possible without each one of you. Thank you. And from all of us at South Texas College Communication Department, take care and do be safe.